Hi, everybody. My name is Kai Savas. Welcome to an amazing conversation. We're doing another collaboration spotlight. We have an amazing trio here, the kind of the music and song team behind all the amazing work done in Theater Camp. We have Bill Sherman and Will Van Dyke, who are the executive music producers, and Mark Sonnenblick, co-composer, songwriter, and music extraordinaire. And guys, thank you so much for sitting down and talking today.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess to start off, I want to go around the room and I guess for people who might not know you and not know like kind of your role in the film and talk about kind of your backgrounds and stuff. And we're here to talk about Theater Camp and the amazing, approach, the comedic approach that the film took with musical theater and all of that. So, but Bill, you want to kick us off? Like, talk about like kind of your maybe quick little summary of like who you are, what you do, and then how you got to this point in your career.
Sure. I'm Bill Sherman. I'm one of the executive music producers of Theater Camp. I also do some other craziness during the day. I'm the music director of Sesame Street, and I work on a musical called Anne Juliet. And I'm trying to think back about Mark. How did we meet, and how did this gig come along? I can't even remember. What was what happened?
We were connected through this. Someone else reached out. Someone from maybe a producer reached out to you. I'm not sure.
Maybe it was that. Yeah. And then the funny part about this project is Will and I have worked on a number of things over the years, and we're looking for another thing to work on. And my favorite thing about Theater Camp is I was once a counselor at a very famous theater camp called French Woods for one summer. And it was one of the craziest summers to this day. And now I'm 42 years old, but it was one of the craziest summers of my life. And so when someone said, "Do you want to work on a movie about I was like, absolutely. I lived it. I know it. I'm totally in 100%. And so I called up Will, and Will said yes. And so we met with Mark, although I must say that like we were always in different places. Like we were very rarely, I don't even think during any of the recording sessions, we were in the same place. And so it was a very funny experience. And it was one of the more like interesting, well, we can get into it later, but like processes in that we piecemealed literally everything in this movie together from different bands, from different places, from different people, from different like all kinds of different, from computers, from live people, and just sort of smushed it all together. And oddly, it was very successful. And I've never done something that's that. I'm not bad mouthing it. It was an interesting process that at the end still yielded like an unbelievably good result. And so that I thought was very interesting in how we work on things. But anyway, over to you, Will.
Yeah, well, first of all, Will, we've got to say for people watching and listening, where you're at Theater Camp essentially, but no, you're real theater.
I'm down in Washington D.C. at Arena Stage working on Swept Away, which is a new musical featuring the music of the Avett Brothers. So that's why there's banjo in the background. And we are having our band seating tonight, so everybody's sort of meandering around behind me.
I love it.
Yeah, but I'm one of the executive music producers of the movie, and Bill and I know each other. I don't know how we know each other, but we worked together on a musical called Fly, and I'm the music supervisor of the musical Pretty Woman and Little Shop of Horrors. So that's sort of how I'm connected to theater and all of the things.
Yeah, and I'm from Maryland. I'm right across the border over in Bethesda, Maryland. So you're close to my home.
Oh yeah, very close. You should come check it out. It's a very good show.
Yeah. I was living in Maryland the past 2 years. And we just moved back to LA in August, so I just left. But so I won't be back for some time. But I do want to see the show. It sounds amazing. But Mark, yeah. So talk to like how did you find your way with this little carnival here?
I basically talked with, so the songs in the movie wrote with Molly and Nick and Ben and Noah, who also all wrote the screenplay. And in it and directed it, and the most multi-hyphenate like talent, especially on this movie. And just kind of connected with them. Initially, they had like sort of this script, kind of a treatment, because so much of it was improvised, the movie. And then at the end, the kids all do this musical, and they, had these kind of ridiculous ideas, kind of descriptions of what these songs might be, and met with them and had kind of like a trial writing session, and went well. And we kind of just, even before I think, you know, in hindsight, realizing maybe even before they knew for sure that the movie was happening. This was in like January, and we started pre-recording in end of May, something like that. But it wasn't like fully go ahead until a few months after that. But we had all the songs kind of written, and then it was kind of like, all right, this is happening, and went right into it. And it was the first time. Basically, once someone said that Bill Sherman, because I had not met Bill or Will before this, but Bill in particular, like, had just, I mean, aside from the number of things he didn't tell you on his resume, just especially a lot of other movies, and he had just done Tick Tick Boom, which was an incredible movie. If you haven't seen it, you should. And so I was like, okay, great. I've never actually been through this process as someone who is kind of more at the center of the music side of making sure these songs happen. But thank goodness somebody will have done that and knows what it looks like to get on set and actually make sure that we are, first of all, pre-recording everything ahead of time the right way, which I've been a little bit around for the process of, but actually implementing on set. You know, what do we need? What are we asking for? How are we protecting the resources on our side so that when we actually show up, we make sure we have everything. And it was such a kind of low budget movie that in a way that was amazing. People really came together, but we never necessarily had everything that we quite needed at any given time. But kind of in the way that Bill was saying, I think like it, we found ways and kind of creative ways to piece things together before and after the fact. And Will also did like the orchestrations, and he and Bill did a bunch of kind of building out these songs, especially for the soundtrack. I think in a cool way, we lucked out that the songs are in the movie, and in the movie they like serve the purpose they need to do, which is like these funny clips of the songs doing it, or the kids like doing the songs. But then on the soundtrack, we actually were able to, because we wrote these full songs, and then we kind of were able to imagine what if the kids were randomly able to record their cast album. And that's really where, you know, these musical geniuses on the music side of things came in terms of making the song sound as incredible as possible in a way that would never be the case at any theater camp. And they're both amazing, by the way, musicians and songwriters as well.
Yeah, you guys are all, I mean, have a rich history and all of this. So I guess before we kind of jump into theater camp, I love to just I love hearing people's like inspirations and like what they grew up loving and everything. So I'm curious, I'll just ask a simple question, like, what does musical theater mean to you? Like, just as a person, as a storyteller, whether you're a fan, as a worker in it, or as a creative in it, what does it mean to you as a person? So Bill, you want to kick us off? What does that mean to you? Why do you love it? Why do you love it?
What I was about to say, the initial answer to your question is like, I never had any intention to be involved in music theater, like full stop, end of conversation. And Will and I talk about this actually frequently. Like, I stumbled into music theater because I had a friend who was like, want to work on my musical, and I was like, sure. And then I sort of tried to resist it forever. And then these cool projects just kept on coming along where I like couldn't say no to them. But like people meet me and they want me to have a rich, in the same way, honestly, that Sesame Street is. They want me to have like a rich historical perspective of like everything Stephen Sondheim and every like, you know, whatever, Gilbert and Sullivan and Roger Hammerstein. And the same way, like they want me to know all of the back history of like Snuffleupagus and Big Bird. And I do now, but I didn't initially. And I'm not like, I don't listen to theater soundtracks, and I don't go to a lot of shows. And especially when I'm working on one, I don't like to have other things messing up my head. But I'm not like, and my girlfriend will say, like, I keep on saying that like I'm not a theater person, but yet I keep on working on theater projects. So what I think I should say is that like I've sort of assimilated into it, and I do love it. And I pick very specific things that are theater related to work on because I have to really enjoy it. And if I don't enjoy it, then I don't do it. And so it's nice to be in your career where you can do stuff like that, which is fantastic. But like, to me, when it really works, it's like new, it's refreshing, it's exciting, and you get to work with your friends. That's because at the end of the day, for me, theater is about working with my friends, because most of my friends, I just walked past Spamalot. It's their opening night, and my friend James is in Spamalot. He was right there. It's the first time I've seen him in months. And so like just things like that, you know, I get to see my friends, and that to me is awesome. And also it's like, it's very rare in life that you get to like work with your friends in such an intimate way, and when it's productive and cool, and I love that. And so like when I was called about this, my first thought was like, oh, Will, I haven't seen Will in like 9 months or a year or whatever, and we only get together when we work. Or like we once went out to dinner, which was a crazy night, but we don't have to talk about that. But like but like that I love, and we had such a good time. And so like here we are, that's what it means to me. There you go.
That's awesome. Will, for you, what does musical theater mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bill just said so much of it, especially when he called them theater soundtracks, when they're cast recordings. But no, for me, like I don't know, I got into it because a very similar reason. It's like truly like the only real collaborative art form, like all of it, from the set to the lights to the and the music, like all of those things working together to tell one story, and all of those things, and that it's just so fascinating to me, and to be able to help be a part of telling those stories is what interested me about it. And I just grew up loving theater, and I sort of was like, oh, this is a thing that like people can do. And when I discovered that, like it sort of like unlocked my life. So
yeah,
and here
amazing. And here you are, they're on DC working on the show. It's amazing. Mark, for you, what does musical theater mean to you?
Yeah, I also, I mean, I performed in a bunch of musicals kind of growing up, but I was never also like similarly not listening to the theater soundtracks like all the time at all moments. And it's been sort of my husband, who did grow up that way, it's sort of a running joke that he is much more versed in like musical theater and composers than I am. But I did love performing, and I did not grow up like near New York, but my family would still go and like see our kind of, community theater, and just always, I think, really spoke to me. I love story, partly because I was acting, and I think the idea that you could write songs that also contributed to this much larger event evening. Maybe as I also realized that like, oh, I'm not going to be like a famous pop songwriter in the context of like nothing else. Part of what I love and I can speak about and want to be engaged with is how can these songs be part of something bigger? And then how can I collaborate? Yeah, both on the music team with people, but also with directors and with writers and with actors and with storytellers who then, writing for an actor, writing for a story moment, trying to think of something that like in the song, like this cool thing will happen that has nothing to do with the music, but it's going to make the moment really amazing, is a fun thing to think about too. And I think that's kind of like over time what's, kept me engaged in addition to, it's the only thing people want me to do really. So
Don't worry, Will. I'm gonna go back and just dub over anytime they say musical soundtrack.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And just put
cast recordings. Will, relax. We've all produced a bunch of them. Just simmer down.
Oh my goodness. All right. So so Theater Camp, I mean, it's such an amazing film. It's such an amazing project. And you guys got to work with such an amazing, bunch of creatives and crew that, the cast and crew, of course. But talk to me about, the first conversations about this project. Like when you sat down and started to kind of map out what the music needed to be, and we're focusing on the songs. You guys worked with another composer that worked on the score, that not featured so much in your guys' world. So we're going to focus on the songs here. But what were, I guess, those first conversations about? And because it is I love the approach. I love the mockumentary approach. I love stuff like Waiting for Guffman and This is Spinal Tap, and like looking at kind of music world like that through this kind of lens, and kind of making it feel real, and just the comedy just kind of naturally comes through from improv and stuff like that. So how did that all play into, I guess, the tone and the direction of what this was going to be for what you guys worked on, and what were the first chats about?
Well, if are we gonna tell the truth here? I mean, I think like the first chats were about like making it sound as bad as possible.
Really? That's right. Yeah. That's true. How can it sound as shitty as possible? That was the first conversation. And Will and I kind of looked at each other and we said, they say they want that, but they don't really want that. And we know that, but we have to convince them that that's not a thing. And so like, that was the first bit. I also will say that I listened to the songs before I read the script. So I was like, ooh, it's like a musical. There's songs all over the show. It's all over the movie. And it just sort of, there's music everywhere. Da, da, da. And then I read the script and it's like, for the 5.5 minutes at the end, there's a montage of these 5 songs like mushed all together. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. I'm totally into it either way. But yeah, that's funny, Will. The initial conversation was, can it sound terrible? And we were like, it can, but you're going to get that. And then nobody wants that. You're not going to like that at all. So then what?
The concept was like at this theater camp, because they don't have like an orchestra, they would just be,
Right.
the counselors would have made like kind of like terrible MIDI tracks because the counselors wrote the songs, and so they'd play it behind the students. So like story wise, they were like, that'll really work. And then also thinking like, that'll be really cheap. You can just like use the MIDI things you're programming. But yeah, as makes sense, when you hear something that sounds really terrible, you're not like, wow, what a funny idea where they like got those
Right.
MIDI tracks, and you're just like, these songs aren't very good, and the music's kind of bad.
Yeah, the
So,
joke kind of probably wears, like, it's there for like a few seconds of the joke, and then it's like you can't sustain that for the whole sequence, I guess.
yeah,
right?
well, you would get the joke, Kaya, but like
Right.
average listener who is not familiar, they're just like, oh, that's, the vibe for the general audience is, I don't really want to listen to that.
Yeah,
And
no, I get that. Yeah,
it-
for sure. But even as an audience, I think like it is funny to see like, oh, here's some inexperienced people doing something, and but if you're going to do a whole piece about it, and it just like keeps going, and then it's like, all right, now it's not fun or funny. We lost, like, the humor is gone, and now it's just like kind of bad. Yeah, I guess I totally get that point of view. So I guess when did the creative direction change? Was it you? Did you have to kind of like guide them to kind of a vision of what it should be, or were they were they open to your perspective, or did they kind of like, did you have to kind of like nudge them and guide them to like get to where it should be?
I feel like it was sort of as because so initially had built out like kind of demos of the tracks that like didn't, I mean, they didn't sound very good because they were like programmed instruments, but they also like weren't deliberately shitty. It was trying to like get
Right.
a sense of what it was. And so I think there was also a way, as makes sense, like going backwards from like the not great demos to something more clearly shitty. It sounded worse. And just as like we shot it knowing that we could always kind of change the backing track later. As we went through it, it like just became clear pretty quickly that it was okay. No, we want these to sound, we don't want it to sound like an orchestra suddenly appeared in a distracting way, but it's more distracting to have bleeps and bloops and that weird thing. And then it became a question of like, okay, well, now we have to turn this around in 3 weeks or a month or whatever it is, and these horns aren't in place. So why don't we like hire horn players from wherever?
I'm pretty sure that like that Bye Bye Birdie song is still like the MIDI thing.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That like somehow stayed in there.
Mark did what all great composers do, is he spends a lot of time writing really fantastic demos and like completely falls in love with it, as is every other creative in the process does. And then the goal is always like you're chasing the demos, right? So like I feel like that's such a commonality in this line of work, which is like people get so used to the demos and the vibe of the demos, and that's great. But like I don't think at times there's not like an openness to find like the next level of the demo, whether you want that or not. Like what's the next, the above beta version of your demo, right? And so like that was an interesting process, and it always is with any composer, because it's like, well, I love this shit that I spent hours in my basement making. Who are you to come along and fuck with it, right? And so then it's like, well, someone's paying me money to fuck with it. This is what I do, like, and so like that back and forth. I mean, if we're talking about the collaborative process, is like sometimes very jarring and not the funnest, but like is 100% part of this thing, which is like, hey, Mark, what if we did this with like a big band with like a bunch of this? And he'd be like, okay. Or like, what if we change this around? And then Mark did what all great composers do, is he's like, let's try it. And we never said, there was never like a full out no. It was always just like, let's try it. Okay, cool. So we tried it, and we did like Will wrote like these epic orchestral string things, and it was like, uh-oh, that doesn't sound shitty, it sounds fucking magical. And then it was like, oh, it sounds magical. And then like that's the thing we went with. And so like, and then I don't know, there's one like funk number thing that we like went back and forth with, like how mechanical is it versus how live should it sound, and and then we kind of like came to this awesome middle ground. And I think that to me was like, I don't know, that's always the fun of it. Again, talking just like very specifically about the collaborative process, like that's 100% the collaborative process, where it was just like, I think Mark was on the Zoom and me and Will were in the studio, and Mark would listen and be like, well, what if this, and and then we would sort of like translate and move it around, and then we got to a point where it sounded pretty great.
Yeah. So I guess what is, speaking of the collaborative process, like, I guess what is the role of your two as executive music producers, and clearly you're working on arrangements and doing stuff from kind of Mark's work. So I'm curious of that flow. Like, Mark, you're just like, you're writing something, handing them off to Bill and Will, and then I guess that's the process, and the back and forth begins then. And I guess do you talk? I guess what are you talking about during those back and forths? Like, what are some problems? What are some things that you really have to fix in that process? I'm curious, like what the trio have you to work, and what are the roles of music producer or with a composer and songwriter like that?
I mean, I think it depends on like the situation. I would say like the reason that Bill probably brought me on like originally is I'm very organized. I'm a very organized human being, and I think that Mark would now agree with that. And like, so I feel like my role was to make sure that it got done, and then these guys like, you know, got to be creative.
That's usually
in, like the doing of it.
For the record, I believe Kaya has interviewed me in other collaborative teams where I have said my job was to get it done, because I've been the get it done guy too. And that's all. So I'm not as organized as Will Van Dyke. That's a fact. I know that, but I'm fairly organized. I do get the job done. But yes, no, but yeah, I will say, since I'm talking a lot, is that the process was, so Mark sent us these demos, these Logic demos, and then I just like took a stab at them, if I'm remembering this correctly. And I was just like, what if it's this? And I threw it, and then I sent it to Will. I was like, and Will was like, cool, let me play piano on it. And then he would play piano on it, or like do something else and then send it back. And like that was sort of like the first level. And then it was like, cool. And I believe that we filmed to those demos, like whatever the next
that's
version
what
of
we
the demo,
filmed to.
right? We filmed to those demos, and then they shot, they edited, and they came back to us, and then it was like, all right, well, now what do we do? And then initially it was, well, we'll get a few live instruments to make it sound live, so it's not completely synthetic, because we had gotten over the let's make it sound shitty thing. So it's like, okay, cool, we're gonna make it sound good. And then it was like, all right, well, now we're gonna make a record, and we had like a budget, so it's like, cool, why don't we make the whole thing live? So we just kept on like piecemeal, like I said initially, like kept on piecemeal replacing things until everything was live and everything sounded like something. And that was cool. Like that was just a different puzzle that I've never really done. And that's sort of how I mean, that's fair. It was like, all right, we're going to record the horns this week. So we did the horns, and then they came back, and then it was like, cool. And then we responded to the horns like, okay, I need the string section here. And then we sort of moved the pieces of the Tetris of it around until it sounded like something, I think. Right.
Yeah. And also like, I was sort of, you know, pretty much anything that got sent, I mean, we would like iterate, but would get sent to in kind of a nice way. The loop was sort of closed, but like the directors and the writers of the movie were also the co-songwriters. So everything would go to them. I was like sort of the music rep of the team, but a lot of the shaping and the notes would come from the four of them as well. And, you know, I feel like typically it's like, you're checking with the other songwriters maybe, and then ultimately you have to go to the directors, and also like there's actually a lot of approvals you have to go through. And it was a little bit nice to have a shorter turnaround of like, all right, well, the directors are also the co-writers, and so if they're down and everyone's okay with it, can come back with it and find kind of what we're looking for. And we'll just say, like, Will did a lot more than just get it done, too. I mean, he did, like...
yeah, you know what I mean.
Well, like he did make sure that he got it done, as well as, like, making sure that, like, the charts were done for the horns, like, and all the arrangement stuff as well. Like, he's...
Will just calls in, is it done yet?
Will did all the work. Will did all the work, and Mark and I sat around and judged him. Like, that's really what happened, and that's how that worked.
But there's also a component too, just because I hadn't gone through, and Will, I don't think you had either, like been on set like that way before, and just like for, you know, there were these days it was like we'd drive up from New York and we'd just kind of be like, all right, we're shooting by like, what do we have to do? Like, let's make sure the playback's working. Were you around for the day when there just wasn't, the playback guy had like gotten hired by another project and just wasn't there?
I remember that.
There was a day, you know, there's that element too, where just like actually part of what it is having one other person sort of around, and I mean, Will definitely being both, whether he was physically there or not, the kind of like, something's happening, Will, I don't really know, like, do you have any thoughts here? Just like give me some emotional support at times, because it was like, I mean, and this is a testament to like how it turned out. I think like it really wasn't all hands on deck. Like we're shooting during, people are getting COVID, like, you know, very much. This was 2022, like still the protocols very much in place. And also like as production was coming back, you know, people who were, and this wasn't just that one playback guy who got hired on another project and like left. So we had a day of playback without playback. And one of the sound guys was like, I'll be doing playback today, I guess, instead of holding this mic. That was happening in like all different departments at different times, and there was kind of a spirit of, all right, you know, there were no extra days. We actually lost days of shooting. We weren't able to go back and do reshoots. We knew whatever we were going to get is what we had to get, and just kind of having a creative, you know, musical support, both like knowing again, like the day of, like, what are we shooting? Are we getting what we need? Are we making sure that we have what's isolated? Are we making sure that like we're playing this with the earwigs in, we're playing this, we're getting, you know, they're dancing to it, so it doesn't matter. After the fact, being like, hey, well, this is what we got. So now how do we make that all sound good? You know, the vocal takes from the pre-records, the vocal takes live. Let's go through all of that. And, you know, Will being very patient, like, you know, at his apartment, like, let's listen to these takes and find the ones that we think we like. And then, you know, hearing that the director's like a different take, and we find that take too. And they're just kind of being in the trenches, I think, as well, like just having a team that also not knowing. I mean, I have no idea. Like I didn't know these guys before this process. It could have been, it could have been like terrible people who were like really mean and like, look, here it is. And they're not getting paid very much. Like they're busy with other things. They might have just been like, this is what it is, Mark. And
buddy,
yeah, you want to like do something with it, go for it. But like, this is what we have been hired for. And this is like what we have time for. So here you go. And it just like, you know, I think hopefully that we're all kind of used to like not having enough resources, and you somehow figure out a way to get it done. And I think there was like a love in some ways for the insanity of what this project was, and like a testament to this art form that is crazy. And I think in a way that's unexpected. Like the movie's more heartfelt than you anticipate, I think in part because of the music at the end. And
yeah.
That was good, Mark. You just summed all the shit up. That was fantastic. Well done.
All right, interview's over, guys. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for welcome to no. But speaking on that, because like collaborative I mean, you guys seem like you have been like lifelong friends. The chemistry is like unreal between all three of you. So like,
we're good actors for this interview. Yeah, we've been prepping for.
We rehearsed this like last week.
So I mean, it does. I mean, it does help when you get to find like, I think, creative minds that kind of sync. And you know, I'm sure, you know, this town is filled with personalities that clash, that don't work. So it can always be a hellish production if you're working with somebody who just kind of, you know, it just adds friction. But it seems like, but sometimes friction works, and sometimes friction builds something new. So, you know, so it can build something up. So, but Mark, I'm curious, what was it, like, your process like working with the, you know, the writers and the directors who are also the songwriters, like that process? And what were you trying to get from them? What were they trying to get from you? Like, what everybody adding to that collaborative process?
Yeah, I mean, well, to your point, like it was, you know, I and have find myself more and more like collaborating with writers and in a cool, exciting way. And you know, not knowing usually what the collaboration is going to look like going in, but also knowing, especially on a film project, for the most part, like, you know, trying to get at the director's vision ultimately, and the writers too. But even with another writer, you know, with theater, you're like writing a score for a musical, like with a script writer, and it's sort of there's a way that the writing really leads. Ultimately, the music writing is leading the storytelling in a deep way. And both because in this movie the musical is just at the end, but film in general have found that, like, as makes sense, you are, you know, there to kind of help with the director's vision, and ultimately their kind of sense of what the movie is and their genius is going to be leading whatever the things are. And that sometimes can be really smooth, that sometimes can be really confining. And it was really kind of amazing with 4 people. You know, what's that going to look like? We were all on a for these songs, and like they had kind of a concept sort of roughly written out, but we would just get on a Zoom like kind of all day. Each song was like a Sunday basically, and we would just like basically, you know, I think it helped that it was comedy, but we're all like pitching the jokes, and we all have a deep in the way that Bill and Will really brought too. But like, I wasn't sure, are they just going to want kind of parody songs? You know, are they just going to want kind of like a little vamp, and then it kind of sounds like that? And but they were really interested in making the music actually feel kind of real. And so it was fun to like be in the room with them and pitching things. They're all, I mean, incredible comedy minds, but also just in terms of the vibe that they wanted, it was really, really clear. And they had a shorthand that, I mean, for the, you know, 4 of them, it could have been like miscommunication and clashes all over the place, but we basically spend a day and we'd have a draft of the song. I'd kind of be at the piano, and then I'd go away and like make the demo and kind of try to flesh it out and see if the sonic world was close to what they wanted. If like whatever the key changes, the tempo shifts were close, they'd give me notes. And we made all those demos basically before, first of all, we knew the movie was going to be like a go. And but then kind of had those ready kind of when Bill and Will joined.
Yeah.
And then kind of went from there. I don't know.
I think that's a testament to like the collaborative nature of theater people. Like people who are involved in the theater world are like inherently collaborative, because in my experience, like movies and theater are very different. Even theater movies, which you would think. But
Absolutely.
like movies, in my experience, it's like super hierarchical. Like there's a director, and whatever the director says goes. And it's not like they're a dick. It's just like there's so many people and there's so much to like whatever the guy says or like whatever that person says, you just do it. Like that's it. There's not really much of a question. If they ask you a question and they want your input and blah blah, that's fine. Whereas at least in my personal theatrical experience, it's like the director and the composer and the orchestrator, and they're all kind of just the choreographer, just kind of like hanging around, and we all just talk and bullshit, and best idea in the room wins. And that to me is always the most successful ones. So like that being said, there are very successful movies with very dictatorial directors, and there are very, you know, like collaborative best idea wins vibes, and everybody wins in the end. But I don't know, they're very different dynamics. In the same way, like titles are different, right? Like executive music producer in a film is not the same is like a music supervisor of a theatrical production, blah 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 blah. But like those titles differ, and like there's definitely like a weird subtle discrepancy between all of them, and like you just have to sort of know what field you're playing in and how to whatever. What I just want to say one other thing about collaborate. I feel like the best, like as organized as Will is, my best thing of all of this is like I know how to put the right people in the room. That's my favorite thing in the whole wide world. And like if I could start like an IO psychology business in which I just make teams of people to do shit, I would, but I'm not organized enough to do that. So here I am.
Well,
but like
Will can help you.
But I know I get Will. Will could be the head of
he'll organize everything
CEO. Yeah. But anyway, but like that to me is the thing. I feel like that's always where I take the most pride of, is like just like putting. My dad, when I was a kid, was like, you should read this book. It's called like Putting the Right People on the Bus, or some stupid title like that. That's like such a dad thing to say. And he's like, you should read it. And I never read it, but I really like the idea of it, which is just like, it's like you put the right collaborations. It's like when you're forming Voltron or like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's like everybody has their job and blah, blah. When you put it together, it's a thing that I love. That's great. And that's this is how that turned out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious for like, so when you're approaching these songs and they're kind of coming to shape and they're coming to like, are they talking to you about like, we want it to sound like, are they referencing Sondheim? Are they referencing like, you know, Andrew Lloyd Webber or anything like that? Like, are you pulling from other styles of musicals and other songwriters, or are you trying to come up something that like these kids or the characters in the film would think is like that? Or, you know, I'm curious how it fits into the story of theater camp versus just like homaging, you know, the great theatrical, you know, experiences of the world, you know.
Yeah, it was pretty, I mean, I think like for the most part, like, you know, Women Cannot Read, it was like they want this sort of immigrant coming, you know, Jewish, we are here, fiddler sort of thing. And so I think in general that one was pretty clear. Same with like the Wall Street tap dance thing, and it's like, all right, well, you can listen to How to Succeed or just 42nd Street, like just trying to find, basically just make playlists sort of as a conversation with the four of them initially to kind of get on the same page. I would say that I forget what they all are, but the Campus and Home, the last one, was the one that was kind of the most open-ended in terms of sound, like wanting it to feel like, oh, like the end, you know, it's sort of like Seasons of Love, maybe, but they really liked the song from the movie Camp, also about theater camp. It's called the Century Plant. Is that what it is? They all, it's like they're all kind of jamming around, sort of folky. And they really wanted that sense of like an organic kind of thing. But there was a whole first part of that song that was, the joke was, what if the counselors had like, and you get a little bit with it in the like, in the glasses and alcohol, there's something more profound. Like there's this weird kind of tangent. But there was a whole thing. It was like, what if they tried to write like a Sondheim-y, like this is amazing musical theater, but it didn't like really translate. And part of what it did come back to is like, how do you, in the same way of the shitty MIDI sounds, like ultimately you're trying to make the thing that is not taking you out of the story sonically, and is just supporting whatever is happening. No Tomorrow's the other one that was like,
yeah, that's like a disco. What I was gonna say is like each of them have their own like the overture is like an overture. There's the How to Succeed number, there's the tap number, there's the disco number. But then I think like what really attracted to me about the project, like when I heard the original demos, was the fact that camp isn't home is like it finally like lands on the voice of like the five of you writing a song. And that's like a really cool thing to like go from like your version of songs through other people's lenses to like a song in like your actual voice, which is cool, you know, and a cool thing to like get part of, like those drums.
Yeah.
Hey, it sounds great. Getting
Sound
swept
good.
away and just the sound of them. Really,
So yeah, I guess I also want to ask about you mentioned about like recording, you know, doing the live records and then everything. So when you have these songs and you take them to the set and they're filming with the songs that you guys have recorded, I guess it's so much different than just, I guess, you know, performing it for a live theater space and you're bringing it to a set to work with. So I'm curious what that process is like and how that differs from maybe a traditional musical theatrical experience and for your guys' process. And are you guys on set when they are recording, and are you guys giving direction? Are you helping them help the actors and helping the filmmakers kind of make sure they capture what they need? I'm curious about that process.
yeah. I mean, the first, not only on this, something that really struck me just like on the first movie I ever worked on, where it was like, oh, this is in some ways the reverse of theater, because in theater, you rehearse it, you're in previews, you like all the people know their performance, and then you record the theater soundtrack for that show. And when you record it, then like they all already know the performance that they're going to give, and they're giving it. Whereas here, you go in for pre-records in a film, you get them in the studio, you might get some stuff live, but the stuff in the studio, they're singing something before they've like maybe fully found the character. Like you're trying to find it in the studio, and then later the performance on screen, they like have to match, you know, unless you're capturing live, they have to match what they've already recorded. So it's like their like physical performance is a little less relevant on this movie, but like on some other ones where it's, hey, you know, like actually your voice is sadder than this. Like you don't look like you're sad enough for the way you're singing. And it's just a funny flip of just what you're used to in theater, which is trying to capture the performance that they have found as opposed to match the vocal performance you're getting ahead of time. That didn't answer the question for theater camp, but just say that was something
No, absolutely.
Every film I've ever worked on, we've done like an app, like essentially ADR, almost entire songs, like Tick Tick Boom, which you brought up before, like that scene at the end when he's doing when I was 9, Michael and I, whatever that is, like he sang it live, and it was unbelievable. But he was like fully crying, and so like all you heard was like tears and like phlegm and like whatever. And so we were like, well, that sounds pretty real, but it sounds not so great. And so it was like, so then it was like, all right. So then we went back and sort of ADR'd a lot of it, but like that's the game. Like that's how it works, which is like sort of the secrets of movie musicals, which is you record one thing, you film another thing, and then after the fact, you try to figure out what you're doing, like where to finally tonally end up, and then matching the tones to work like that.
Yeah. We got lucky with this where the kids are so amazing that at least for theater camp, a lot of the solo stuff that they're singing, we were able to get live because we had rehearsed the show. It's like kind of okay if it's not perfect, because first of all, it's like literally theater. You know, if it's a musical where they're walking down the street and
they're literally kids. I mean, it's like nobody wants to hear perfect kids. But that's where like the pre-records were really helpful because it forced them to learn the songs. And so then when they were on set, like the stuff we were capturing was that much better.
Did the fact that they were kids change the approach at all? Or you were writing for child actors, like did that change your approach at all, or was it not really a thing? It was didn't come into your head, like
just the keys.
We
changed some keys, but not really. I don't know. I mean, I didn't write it, but I think key wise, didn't we move some keys around for the kids?
Yeah,
I've always done that.
Ben in some of the demos, Ben would try to he would sing in falsetto, try to imagine,
approximate a child, but approximate a child who had a crazy voice. And you're like, still too high.
Will and I worked on a musical with kids and had to change all the keys all the time because their voices were changing and all this stuff. It was great. I mean, it really kept you on your toes. It was wild.
Yeah, we would get the note. In putting the songs together after the fact, this sounds a little too good. The kids sound a little too good. How do we still have it feel as though they could be singing live or even the ensemble stuff in particular, you can't really get live because there's just no, you have to isolate all these. There'd be no way to really do it. But the solo stuff, it's easier, obviously, because you can just mute everything, have them sing and capture it the way you would dialogue.
And since it was kind of a small film and small budget film, with like, what is the key, I guess, to stretching a budget on something like this to make it work? Because, you know, recording music is so expensive. We all know how it can be, but for a good reason, because there's so many people involved and so many talented, you know, people putting their hours of their lives into it. So I'm curious, working on something like a production like this, where you're trying to capture that, you know, make everything look amazing as possible. And I guess what allowed you to get that budget to do kind of the bigger album at the end? Was it just like did that money just appear out of nowhere? Or did it, like, I'm curious how that went. Like, that's amazing that
more
it
or less. Thanks to
I will say.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, well, the pandemic is one, because like what you're hearing in the movie is like we didn't have to get a studio to record all the instruments you hear in them, because like everybody has home studios. So like that was a huge part of stretching the budget, is we could get people to record at home and then like put it together and like make it cohesive and like cool like that. But then, I mean, Bill, what were you going to say about money appearing?
Oh, and then we went to make they came, Interscope or whoever it was came out to make a record, and all of a sudden we had a record budget, and so that sort of changed things completely.
That's
and
awesome.
So that's very, by the way, and that's super rare. Full stop. Usually, like, you're taking the tracks you made for the movie and just like remixing them for a thing, mostly because you've already recorded them with real instruments. Whereas our thing was a little bit different, where it was like this hodgepodge that we later made a full podge of liveness. You know what I'm saying? And so like that was, and so they gave us a budget, and we didn't. It was great, and it was totally, and yeah, they gave us a legit budget to do it right, and we did it right, and that was really cool. I mean, that's not a, you know, in a indie movie, that's a rarity, if not a never. And so I thought that was pretty great.
That's amazing.
They were really supportive of, we weren't able, I don't think we went back and got any of the kid recording again, but again, like, we had just, part of it helped, like, it was 5 songs, whatever, like we got the vocals we needed, but then we were kind of like, yeah, we need this amount to get the instruments, to get it to sound incredible. And they were like, okay. And I may never happen again.
Well, I think you guys did such an amazing job. I mean, the film is hilarious. It's poignant. It's just a wonderful collaborative, and you can feel the collaboration behind it, because not just the writing of the film and the acting, because I know it came from the short film that they all made and kind of, you know, blossomed into this feature. And it's on Hulu for people, you know, go check it out. It's a wonderful, if you like stuff like Christopher Guest and stuff like that, I think it's a really in line with that kind of that comedy and that humor. And I'm as we wrap up, you know, maybe just talking about musical theater and stuff in general, I'm you know, especially comedy stuff like this as comedic. Do you think that, like, we've seen kind of this rise of kind of just also comedic musical theater, whether it's like Book of Mormon or Avenue Q or stuff like that? Do you think that's helped, like, the general public, I guess, maybe jump into musical theater a little bit more versus more like kind of the traditional stuff like Phantom of the Opera, stuff like that? Or, you know, I'm curious what your take is on that genre of comedic musical theater. And do you think it has helped, or do you think the traditionalists are like, no, that's like a little bit too kind of mocking the whole thing? I'm curious.
Well, here's a hot take. You know, musical theater prior to like 1980 was like the music that you would hear on the radio. Like, that's what it was, like in the 40s, like 50s, 60s, all that stuff. And then, like, you know, what happened in the 80s with like Phantom and those things, it's sort of like there became this like divergent thing. And I think what the comedy has helped, but also like things like Bill is doing with Anne Juliet and stuff like that, that's like, it's trying to like bring them back together.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think that is the thing that's exciting, and like is going to ultimately get people back into the theater, is if they trust, like, when they go to the theater, they're going to hear music that sounds like the music we listen to, you know, and not some like its own like genre of music.
Sure.
Which is part of, I mean, Bill's show right now, the sing along that is going to start imminently, Anne Juliet is Max
Terrified.
Martin.
Yeah, that's gonna be great. I wish I could be there.
I mean, it's either gonna be like the best thing ever, or like, oh no. Either way, like, I'm all for it. Like, fuck
either way, it's gonna be the best thing ever. No matter. It's gonna be great.
Either way, I don't think there's a way that it's bad. Yeah.
Yeah. But part of you know, what Bill is, and then just the shows that Bill's been a part of, like, part of his genius is being able to bridge that gap, like, of the sonic worlds of what you listen to in pop, and also get people to actually listen to the songs. And if you have not seen Anne Juliet, go see Anne Juliet, Kaya. when you move to New York, or where, I mean, I know you can only see shows wherever you live, but like when you're in New York.
Bring it to Pantages.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it'll be at Pantages sometime next year, I suppose, or the year after that.
Amazing.
Yeah. No, it's but like part of what's incredible is the balance of taking these pop songs that you know, and a lot of times when you listen to pop, like you aren't necessarily listening to the lyrics. I mean, you certainly in a lot of cases, but the way that when you put it on stage, it's actually, you kind of do need to listen to the lyrics, because typically the show is teaching you to invest in the story. And that's just an example of a show where you're taking these iconic songs, but because of, what all the creatives, including Bill, have done to the pacing and the rearrangements and the way it works, suddenly those become text in the story. And I think, like in the way Will's saying, there's a lot, I mean, definitely Hamilton, but Six, there's a lot of shows that are, what does it look like to bring that music into theater and have it actually tell a story? Some work well and some don't, but
absolutely,
it works.
Well, guys, thank you so much for all your insight. I mean, it's been such a fun chat. I mean, I know you guys are so busy, so I appreciate jumping in and chatting about theater camp and musical theater, and it's been so enlightening. So Bill and Bill, Will, and Mark, thank you so much, and congrats on the movie. I think it turned out so well, and I think your involvement and your touch like really helped the perfect thing for the whole thing, and I really enjoyed chatting with you guys.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Enjoy the film if you haven't seen it.